Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Progress America Unfiltered. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with Jocelyn, and we've got an exciting episode for you today. But first, we're going to start with a new segment that we haven't done yet, and we're calling it Too Much Bad News, So Little Time. So I am going to do my best to get through all of the bad news that has happened over the weekend since the last time we talked, and we'll just see what happens there. So if the clock is starting, let's go in 3, 2, 1. So, Clarence Thomas. We found out over the weekend that Clarence Thomas has been subject to decades of trips being bankrolled by a Dallas millionaire, Harlan Crow. We're talking private jets. We're talking yacht trips to the Adirondacks, which, fun fact, he also news broke that this Dallas billionaire has a bunch of Nazi artifacts, really creepy stuff, signed copies of Mein Kampf. So that's very exciting for the Black Supreme Court justice to be hanging around. And this actually breaks a Watergate law that states that judges and federal officials and justices like Clarence Thomas need to declare gifts and monetary things like this, which he did not do for literally over 2 decades. So very exciting stuff. Another way that our Supreme Court is at it again. Moving on. In Texas, Mifepristone, which we talked about earlier on the show, was just ruled an injunction by a Trump-appointed judge. Basically, he said that the FDA shouldn't have approved Mifepristone. That's bad news. That could get the drug taken off of the market for millions of Americans. However, the Biden administration is already appealing this ruling. We also have a Washington state ruling that is directly contradictory, saying that the drug is completely safe, which means, dun, 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 this is probably going to go to the Supreme Court. Who are famously good at protecting abortion rights. If you didn't get that, that was me being sarcastic. So we'll see what happens there, but hopefully Mifepristone will be able to stay on the market for the people who need it. Let's check my time. Okay, we're doing great. Last but not least, I want to talk about what's going on in Nashville. On the show last week, we talked about the Nashville protests and the 3 Democratic legislators in the House that got expelled for joining students protesting and advocating for an end to assault weapons. Fun fact, the Nashville legislature and the Republican supermajority in the House expelled 2 out of the 3 Democratic legislators. The only 2 happened to be the 2 youngest Black Democratic legislators, and the white woman magically got to keep her position with 1 vote. Shocking, I know. But the good news is one of the Justins, it's Justin Pearson and Justin Jones. Justin Jones was just reinstated by a Nashville council vote, so he's already been sworn in again, and he's ready to keep fighting for freedom. But Nashville's saying the quiet part out loud, and we cannot wait to continue watching and calling them out. That's all we've got for all the bad news in so little time. Check the clock. We still have 8 seconds, but I'm going to pass it to Jocelyn. Anything about those 3 news stories stand out to you?
No, I feel so informed, but the Clarence Thomas thing did blow my mind the most, I think. Which is wild. That probably says something about me. I shouldn't be able to be surprised by anything Clarence Thomas does, but the man who says that you don't deserve to have your medical or student debt forgiven is literally yachting around with corrupt Nazi billionaires. I don't know. I feel like that was shocking.
It's shocking, and it's also so just annoying and frustrating. And it's like, what happened to ethics? Like, seriously, this guy, Clarence Thomas, has such a long history of unethical behavior, mostly sourced by his wife and her, need to stoke the fires of right-wing essentialism in this country. And, at the heart of it, everything from Anita Hill to the Bush v. Gore ruling to the insurrection. Clarence Thomas is always there, and Ginny's always right behind him with like a mischievous grin. So I'm not surprised, but it adds more questions of how are we going to hold these lifelong appointed positions that did not get the vote of the people accountable? And so it's pretty sickening. But also the Nazi memorabilia, like I literally just found out about that before this call, and it's like, of course he has that.
So on a lighter note, we wanted to offer you guys, if not some good news, at least something to be working towards. Today, we wanted to talk about the Nordic model, and in honor of Finland being 6 years in a row voted the happiest country in the world. Well, assessed the happiest country in the world by the United Nations. We wanted to talk a little bit about that and how these countries manage to preserve such remarkable well-being when this trend started long before there were the wealthy, prosperous economies they are now. So for those who don't know, the Nordic model refers to a method of social democracy where capitalism and the state are able to coexist and symbiotically help one another. Ironically, that means like very little bailing out of banks and one percenters. They tend to let rich people fail, which is a good thing. The things that they invest in instead are education, healthcare. Everybody that lives in these countries has a guaranteed pension. The labor movements in Scandinavian countries are the strongest in the world. Gender equality is the strongest in the world. And every person who gives birth is guaranteed not only free childcare, but in Finland is sent a little baby box that can be used as a crib filled with diapers and bottles. It's just a different way of doing government and doing economics. And a lot of sociologists posit that it's partially because their economies are so cold. They were founded on forced collaboration. Other people think it's because they were Lutheran countries, which tends to emphasize as a religion more humility, more collectivism than some of, I was raised Catholic, so I can say this, ostentatious hierarchy. But whatever it is, these are cultures which value a sense of no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, you can not only succeed, you can not only thrive, but it's better if we're all thriving. Competition is encouraged, but all or nothing competition isn't. And so for years and years and years now, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, all these countries which emphasize this communitarian system of government continue to be voted the best place to live. I think that's very encouraging.
I definitely think that's interesting. And you started to talk about this a little bit, but I think we should kind of dig in deeper. So what are the fundamental differences? I mean, especially like living in America, we're grown up, you say the pledge every day. You grow up thinking this is the best country in the world, but studies and time again are showing we're not the happiest, we're not living the longest, we're not the healthiest, we don't have the best education outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So you've already touched on it a little, but like, where do we think these fundamental differences are coming from? And where is the kind of disillusionment also coming from, where we think we're the best country in the world in the United States, yet we have all of these terrible outcomes?
Well, I think the thing is that, if you're born in Norway, anyone can be rich, but nobody can be poor. And that's a very different way of viewing wealth. And as a result, realistically, they don't have as many billionaires as we do. And they also don't have a culture which fetishizes extreme wealth. There's a phrase that the French have culture, the Scandinavians have nature. These are countries that really prize not only time off, but time outside with your families, which is ironic to me because they're some of the coldest countries in the world. But if you're born in Sweden or Denmark, it's very likely that even if you're an ordinary person, you have a cabin in the woods where you and your family spend your frequent holidays, like hanging out and going hiking. Where in America, the class system is so aggressive and so brutalizingly polarizing, we don't even think about it, because in America, you're either ultra rich or you're working class. And there are lots of ways that our propaganda machines obscure that. But the reality is, in America, it takes very little for your life and your family to fall into a state of disaster, whether it's a medical emergency or sudden unemployment. If you become unemployed in Finland, there's unemployment insurance, there's disability insurance that you're guaranteed just by living there.
Absolutely. And I think, something we tend to stray away from, like us specifically at Progress America Unfiltered, we tend to stray away from phrases like, the social safety net and things like that. But I do really think that is one of the big differences is there's a guaranteed, there are systems in place that ensure that nobody falls through the bottom, hopefully. But I do want to get into a little bit about the people who may actually fall through the bottom. And I first want to start with a joke that literally just popped into my head. It's not a joke, but way back on Twitter, like a year ago or something, Sweden was trending because a bunch of people who grew up in Sweden were talking about how when you would go visit a friend's house or something for dinner, do you remember this? You'd like go visit a friend's house for dinner or like to play with them, and then like they wouldn't serve you dinner and you'd have to like wait upstairs until they were done eating and then you could come down. Or similarly, I think I saw something about someone saying like, if you stay over, you have to like bring your own sheets and things like that. Any thoughts, any comments on that cultural aspect?
Well, actually, I love that you bring that up, Tyler, because I forgot to mention this. Something that else that defines Scandinavian cultures is you hear all this stuff about guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed education. You would think that they're very like warm and fuzzy people. They're not. These safety net investments are actually predicated on a fierce independence where, so an American culture, there's a lot of financial enmeshment and personal relationships by necessity, right? You get married, you combine finances. Your parents probably helped you with college if they could. There's lots of like kind of blurred boundaries that one Finnish journalist says in her observation leads to a lot of American codependence, where Scandinavians are actually very private. Parents don't pay for college because they don't have to. Partners don't file taxes together. There is a much more emphasis on privacy, and I take care of me and you take care of you, and we collaborate symbiotically through paying higher tax rates because they do pay higher tax rates. But this exuberant like socialness that I think is a good thing about America doesn't really exist, which isn't to say they're unpleasant people. I mean, when I have been to these countries, I've been surprised by how kind they are, but they're very reserved, which is something that plays into why they want everybody to be able to take care of themselves because they believe deeply in independence.
That makes a lot of sense. And so I guess kind of segueing into that, I think it's safe to say that the rise in right-wing and nationalism specifically that we've seen in America, we are also seeing in Scandinavian countries. So I'm curious to hear from you on how that is impacting these happiness outcomes and these social, systems, and what that means for people who live in Scandinavian countries who might look like me.
Well, I'm really glad you bring that up, Tyler, because and this is where the experience gets a little bit more complicated between cultures. You know, Norway and Denmark have an excellent track record of, they were like the most resilient to fascism in the Nazi days, where Finland and Sweden have played footsies with the far right a lot. And, you know, historians posit that Finland's border with Russia means they're more naturally jingoistic and guarded. But whatever the reason, racism is alive and well in the Scandinavian countries. And there are a lot of the far right is utilizing high cost of living and that the entire world is dealing with right now to fuel xenophobia that has always been present in those cultures, because a lot of people do want to immigrate there. Of course they do. But a lot of those people are not white. And it's creating a lot of hate, and it's creating fueling a lot of hate that already existed and bigotry.
Absolutely, especially because they're countries that are so homogenous. And so, when you go there, it's very clear who, not very clear, but, you think that you can tell by looking like who grew up here and who didn't. I want to shift gears just a tiny bit because I do have this question for you. It's a genuine question that I have. You mentioned Finland, and I want to talk about what's going on with the Finnish prime minister. Do you know anything about that? What's going on with the prime minister and her resignation and things like that?
Yeah, so she's been ousted by, I always pronounce his name wrong, Petteri Orpo. So Finland has a parliamentary system, so it's not as all or nothing as our leadership is, but he won 20% of the population vote, and now Finland is dealing with conservative leadership, which a lot of Finns are deeply troubled by because it has such a strong reputation for being such a progressive country. And it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. All of these countries have historically had better rates of female leadership than ours has. So this was a really sad outcome to see, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw, and I'm sure you did as well, some kind of very sexist, it's almost giving like early 2000s-esque news stories and like photos of her, this young Finnish prime minister at the time, dancing at a club with someone and like things that, any other adult woman would be expected or allowed to do. And it is a little regressive and like frustrating to see. But, we can't even talk because we just got our first female vice president, but we've never really had women in those levels of leaderships in our nation. So,
well, no, but I think it's important to talk about because, a lot of critics of idealizing the Scandinavian model point out that a couple things. First of all, they're not perfect. They still deal with misogyny, racism, classism, all that. But two, a lot of their gains are built on exploitation of the global South. And that's true of all Western countries. Like they're able to have these elaborate safety nets because of extracted wealth. And that's why we can't talk about these global questions in silos. We have to be fighting these fights collectively. And, ultimately, like Western patriarchy exists in every Western country. It's not something that, even if they're doing better, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely. And you're already touching on this. So I think as we wrap up this conversation, what do we as the United States stand to learn from our Northern European Icelandic neighbors, and what lessons do we think we should take? What lessons do we think we should leave as we try to, push for progress here in the United States?
I think what I find so inspiring about the Nordics in general is that they just have a very rigorous sense of what the good life looks like. In America, we do not have that. You can be incredibly prosperous and it's never going to feel like enough. We have sort of an insatiable culture of excess, which obviously leads to barbarous inequality where, I live in Washington, D.C., which should be the nation's capital, and there are unhoused people everywhere. And as Americans, we take that for granted because inequality haunts all of our major cities. That's not true when you're in Oslo. It's not true when you're in Finland because they believe in investing in the middle. Ironically, it's much easier to be a business founder, owner in these countries because they don't have to take care of healthcare. They don't have to take care of pensions. Like Tyler, if you and I want to start a business today to employ people, we would have to figure out how to fund healthcare, 401ks, all these other things. They don't have to do that. They can just take a great idea and run with it. And I think there's something very exciting about the idea of investing in a culture where everybody is doing well and the creativity that can come from that.
I love that answer. And I think that's something that we strive to do every day here. And we're learning from our neighbors and other European countries. And we're also taking what works and leaving what doesn't. So on that, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for coming on the show today. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, follow us on TikTok, do all that good stuff. And we will see you guys next time at Progress America Unfiltered. Bye.